Welcome to another episode of Nacoa's Lunchtime Lives, a series of live interviews where I speak to people that have advocated for Nacoa and COAs alike, and these go out normally on one of our social media platforms. And in this episode, I speak to the incredible powerhouse that is Sarah Drage. Now, Sarah lost her father to alcohol addiction a number of years ago and has advocated strongly and powerfully for more support for children affected by a parent's drinking. Sarah is incredibly open and we go into what her experiences were like both growing up and having lost her dad to alcohol abuse. This is an incredible interview, really thought-provoking, powerful and truthful, and I really hope you take away as much from this interview as I did. If this is the first time that you've ever been here, then please do make sure that you subscribed, you turn on the notifications so you know each and every time that we post a new video.
For the people that are already in here, because we've got quite a few people in here already, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing in the world at the moment?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Sarah Drage. I am the child of an alcoholic. Although when I say child, it doesn't feel normal. I feel like I'm an adult, but no, I'm a child of an alcoholic. And I am working so hard at the moment to try and break down the stigmas attached to alcohol use disorder, as I genuinely believe that's what caused my dad's death. I lost my dad in 2017 to alcohol addiction. And really, it was at that point that was my make or break moment. I knew when he died, when we switched off that life support machine, I knew that I would either sink or swim. So I kind of dealt with a lot of my own mental health issues at that point, which was a consequence and a repercussion of being the child of an alcoholic. And I channeled them into founding a charitable Warrior Kind, where we are really working hard to break down the stigmas associated with mental health. Because I actually believe that alcohol addiction is a symptom of a mental illness most of the time. I know that's not usually the case, that might not be the case for some people, but for a lot of people, I mean, my dad especially was using alcohol, and his words to me were, "I drink to forget." So that was PTSD, it was anxiety, it was depression. That was his coping mechanism, the alcohol. And that's what he used to drown out the noise. So yeah, my charity Warrior Kind is working really hard at the moment to break down those stigmas, that stereotype, and just to have open, honest conversations like this, because I believe that it's part of life. It's stuff like this happens. Life isn't always perfect, and I think there's a massive thing at the moment, and there always has been, but social media amplifies it, that we need to only share the good things that goes on in our life. So I've started having these open, raw, unapologetically honest conversations about what it was like, and I talk about everything from the sadness, the heartbreak, to the guilt and the relief. Like, I genuinely felt relief when he died, and I used to feel ashamed to admit that, but now I don't actually feel that shame or that guilt, because I can't control my emotions. I can't control what I feel. So kind of just embracing it, talking about it, and yeah, I feel like I've gone off in a bit of a whirlwind there, but that's me. That's what I'm doing at the moment.
No, you haven't. And, you know, look, this is why we do these lives, and this is why we like to talk to people like yourself, because I think even there in what you've said, the guilt that you feel for feeling the relief when you lose your parent in that way, that was a real, I remember when I kind of heard that being spoken about at Nacoa, when I found Nacoa all them years ago, and it was such an eye-opener for me to kind of know that those feelings based on the experience that I were having were pretty normal.
Yeah.
And it's like you say, these kind of conversations, doing these kind of conversations, do normalize the kind of abnormal.
Yes.
That makes sense. And I think it's really important. So look, I'd like to today, if we can, to dive into hearing about your life's experiences and what led you to be where you are today, right? And what led you to create Warrior Kind. I want to talk about your YouTube video, the TEDx video that you've done. But let's start at the beginning. Can you hear and see me all very nicely now, by the way?
I can hear you. You're a little bit pixelated, but I can see you.
Okay, as long as you can hear me and you can see me, it's all about you anyway, so it doesn't matter. Tell me, was it always like this with your dad? What's your first memories of him with alcohol? Was it like that ever since you can remember? Was it a gradual thing?
It was a gradual thing. So I
Right.
was glued to my dad's hip as a child. I used to go everywhere with him. I was his eldest daughter, his firstborn. Um, and we had an amazing relationship, and I have some really fond childhood memories of him. He went through something incredibly traumatic, which I won't share out of respect to my family and my dad, but it was at that point, and I was probably around 9 or 10, that I really noticed a change in my dad's personality. So silly things back then was like he weren't playing with me like he would have done, or he weren't his usual bubbly happy self. There was something, there was an expression in his face, there was a look in his eyes that was just sadness. And it was from then on that I always used to see him with a drink in his hand. So he'd always have like, and it was back then it used to be whiskey. So there was always a drink in his hand, whiskey. And as I got older, into my teens, the addiction really started to escalate. And that's when I really started to notice, okay, there's something, he's not normal. I used to think he's not normal. I didn't understand that it was the alcohol. I used to think he wasn't a normal dad. And I mean, define normal, what is normal? But there was signs like his attitude would change. So it's almost like he had two different personalities. He was never aggressive or violent, but his tone would change. And usually when his tone changed, he would start dwelling on what had happened to him in his past and his traumas that he'd been through. And then his eyes would be glazed, his face would be puffy. And I got to know that my dad had certain quirks and certain ways around him, but I didn't understand that it was the alcohol. So growing up as a teenager, when we come to any like landmark events or any special events, I would always worry and think, oh, please don't embarrass me. What mood is he in today? And one of the common words or sentences that I use, and I use it today, it's really kind of instilled within me, is what mood is he in? And so I'm very sensitive and nervous now around people's bad moods, because it's just ingrained this anxiety in me that's just stuck. So my husband, bless him, always hears, oh, are you in a mood? What mood are you in? And it's that kind of, it's just instilled in me, and I care about people's bad moods. And I think that is all part and parcel of being that child of an alcoholic. So my dad's addiction was probably at its worst when I was in my 20s, and he was using drink at that point more consistently. So it was becoming like a morning thing, and it would get worse and it would go on to the day. And then when I'd come home from a day out, he would have the curtains drawn, he'd be sat there, and I'd know that, oh, he's in one of his moods again. I really understood it was alcohol when I was a lot older, but again I was in denial, and he was in denial, and I think that's all part of the illness, isn't it? He used to say, I can stop this if I wanted to, this is my thing, I don't go out anywhere, this is what I enjoy doing. And if I ever approached him about it or tried having that difficult conversation, at the beginning it would usually be, there's nothing wrong with me, you're being dramatic, you're blowing things out of proportion. So it was a very good way there of making me not worry about him. And I think he always used to have this thing where, I'm your dad, you don't need to worry about me, I worry about you. It's difficult when you're seeing somebody you love waste away, become the shell of the person they were, and all of a sudden their drinking is getting so much more worse that you can notice physical dependent symptoms within him. So when I was 25, 26, he turned up to a family holiday, and he was just really, really, really drunk, really bad. So I took him home, and it was at that point that I suppose I didn't realise what I was doing at the time, but I stopped enabling the addiction. So I was constantly, prior to that, I'm always trying to fix him on the situation. I'm trying to fix this issue, I'm trying to fix a problem, I'm always fighting with him over it, saying horrible things to him, lashing out at him, telling him it's his own fault, it's self-inflicted, you're doing this to yourself, there's worse stuff out there, which is the worst things to say, and I understand that now, but it's important that I share that. So when I was 25, 26, I basically, as the eldest out of my sisters, said to my sisters, under no circumstances contact dad until he admits that he has a problem. So we kind of used his weakness. My dad's weakness was his girls. He absolutely adored his girls. He adored his grandchildren. We were his weakness. And I knew that by removing ourselves from that situation, that it would force him into getting help. And it took 3 months. It took 3 months of me checking in every day to see that he's not killed himself. But I always used to say, you're not seeing us, Dad. You're not seeing me and my sisters. You're not seeing your granddaughters until you admit that you need help. And he did. 3 months from that, he rang me and he said, I will do anything you want me to do, because what I have been through is nothing in comparison to losing my girls. It always chokes me, that bit does, because hearing that back, it's just really tough. But we forced him into it. And I suppose looking back on it, he needed to do that himself. And I know that now, but we didn't understand what we were dealing with. So when we took him into this detox clinic, and I could see the look in his eyes, and he said to me, and he muttered under his breath, he said, I am so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed that I'm here. And I just said, Dad, I'm so proud of you. Like, look what you're doing. You're getting help. Like, this is the first step to recovery. We're going to get you better. And again, I didn't understand. I didn't understand the complexities of being addicted to alcohol. I didn't know at that time he was addicted to it physically. I was pouring his alcohol down the sink like months before, thinking that I would be helping him. I didn't realise that withdrawal is deadly. Didn't understand any of that. And then the doctor actually explained that, you know, he's physically dependent. He's showing signs of dependency. Under no circumstances take the alcohol away from him. He needs a clinical detox to come off of this. And he did it. He did it within like a few months. He was completely off the alcohol and he was sober, but very naively, we didn't treat the mental health. We thought, oh, he stopped drinking. He's fine. He's not an alcoholic anymore. Yeah. But we didn't understand that. We didn't understand that this is a lifelong commitment that my dad is going to have to put a lot of effort and energy, and we all are around him, are going to have to put a lot of energy and effort into maintaining this. We just assumed he's off the drink, he's not an alcoholic anymore. 12 months after that, my granddad died, his dad, in 2017, March 2017. And he took it very badly, but he didn't open up to it. My dad was a northern man, very stubborn, very proud, very sucked into that toxic masculinity of there's nothing wrong with me, showing weakness, showing vulnerability, which ultimately, ironically, killed him because he didn't show that vulnerability. He didn't ask for help. So he was, where am I going with this? So my granddad died and then he started drinking again. But this time, where he'd been off for so long, he needed something a lot stronger, and he was drinking neat vodka, a litre a day that we know of. And that was then, at that point, I've never, ever in my entire life felt frustration like it. It literally felt like I'm the eldest daughter. My mum and dad were separated, so I'm the one having to deal with this. My dad was at the peak of his addiction, to the point where it was that bad that this time he's now passed out on the sofa or on the floor most days. He's coughing up blood. He's bloated. And again, I just thought, we've been through this again, we'll go through another detox. I'd been in that situation so many times where it was, I just need to come off, I just need a detox, or I just need to stop drinking for a bit and I'll be fine. That I didn't take it seriously. I didn't understand what was happening. I'm very, very naive to it. And in the August, he was admitted into A&E because he really deteriorated. He suddenly stopped drinking. He got frightened. And yeah, I walked into an A&E room, sitting, watching him sat up in a wheelchair. He didn't recognise me. He was clammy. He was cold. And he just weren't my dad. My dad weren't there. And it took 30 hours from that moment of admitting him to A&E. It was 30 hours until we were switching off his life support machine. Now, when we were in A&E, I saw paramedics shake their heads, because it's not you don't go into A&E and you're not taken into a private room to admit somebody. You have to have that conversation, and usually it's quite in an open environment where people can hear you. So I've checked them into A&E. There's paramedics shaking their heads, there's people tutting, there's people rolling their eyes. The looks that we were getting were just heartbreaking. And it was at that point that I truly understood my dad must have been in so much pain to drink to that point, that we didn't pick up on it, and we didn't understand the severity of what he was going through or what he was coping with. And it's no wonder he didn't want to get help or support, because look at the looks he's getting, look at the feedback and the reactions from people he's getting was just highlighted to of I was ashamed of my dad's drinking. I outwardly pretended everything was fine because I didn't want that association. I mean, really, looking back, I was brought up in my teenage years on a council estate. I was a young mum, pregnant, whilst I was at university, and my dad's an alcoholic. I had some stereotypes to contend with. I wanted to put on this facade. I wanted to outwardly pretend, no, he's fine. So when he died, and people who knew how he died would say to me, he did this to himself, had himself to blame, it was self-inflicted. So all that did to me was, when people asked, I would lie and I would tell them he had a heart attack. Because I didn't want, I felt like disloyalty to my dad. I felt a disloyalty by telling people. And I also felt embarrassed. And I think I have to admit that. If I'm on this journey, I'm trying to break down the stigma. I can't preach we shouldn't stigmatize this illness and not admit that I used to do that myself. So it took everything that had happened, and well, not it took me longer than that. It took me a lot of therapy and a lot of coming to terms with it. At the same time, there's so many emotions attacking that child of an alcoholic who's passed away. Everybody says you naturally feel guilt when somebody dies, but this was different. This was a guilt like I'd never felt guilt like it. It was almost, I remember thinking I could have done more. I should have done this. I should have said that, or I should have got him to hospital sooner. And then I felt relieved because I didn't have to go through that worry. I didn't have to be on edge or anxious or worried about my dad's future anymore, because he's not here for me to worry about. And then I felt guilty for feeling relief, but then I felt relieved that he weren't suffering anymore. And then I felt angry with him for putting us through that, and I felt frustrated, and I felt just all kinds of emotions that I had to contend with before I could even start the grieving process. So fast forward a year or so, and I really came to terms and had a lot of therapy, a lot of trauma therapy, a lot of counselling, grief counselling. It was at that point where I thought, developed this anger within myself. I developed an anger with society for stigmatising, and I was so passionate about this viewpoint that the stigma killed my dad, because had people been more sympathetic or compassionate or empathetic towards him, then perhaps my dad would have felt more empowered and confident to get help. And that's where the TED Talk came from. So I really genuinely believe the stigma is deadly, because, and the other thing that got me so frustrated is it's no different to smoking. It's no different to eating the wrong foods, lack of exercise. And when you start thinking about all of that, and you start thinking about society's relationship and society's viewpoint towards alcohol, I mean, it's the only substance, or the only toxic substance we shame people for not having. If you go to a party and you don't have a drink, you're boring. Or if I go to a party and I decide I don't want to have a drink, people think, oh, you're pregnant. I'm like, no, I just don't want to drink. I don't, like, my relationship with alcohol is not the same anymore because of what happened to my dad. So you're shamed for not having it, and then you're shamed if you have too much. And then if you get sucked into that vicious cycle of addiction, where with alcohol, it's one of the few substances where withdrawal can kill you. So you're sucked into that vicious cycle of, now you're addicted to alcohol, but now you need help to come off of it. But the shame and the stigma and the discrimination that's attached to it prevents people from saying, I need help. I need help to come off of this. So for my dad, it was easier for him to drink, and millions of other people. And when I thought about this, it really broke my heart. It was easier for my dad to drink himself to death than it was to say, I need help. And that there
Wow.
really just instilled this passion and this fire within to think, this needs to change. How can we have funding to stop smoking? You can walk into a pharmacy, there's advertisements, there's bunting in my local pharmacy, and there's funding there to help people stop smoking. It's covered behind a screen. There's warning labels attached to it. Whereas alcohol, it's accessible, it's in your face. It's, you walk into a supermarket, it's there, it's promoted, it's glamorized, and it just fueled this fire within. And that's where the idea for the TED Talk came from, the idea to set something up like Warrior Kind in my dad's memory. And yeah, I've had some amazing feedback and amazing support. I've had so much encouragement from the community from just talking, and I think that encouragement alone has really motivated me to keep going. Sober Dave has just been absolutely incredible. He's very well known within the community, very respectable, and he's really supported the mission and supported what I'm doing. So we're kind of on a little bit of a collaborated mission now to break down these stigmas. We're going to be doing some talks in schools. We've got lots of other things up our sleeves. So yeah, that's where really I feel like I've talked for so long. I've not let you get a word in edgeway.
I don't need to get a word in. I don't need to get a word in when you're saying all the things that you've been saying, because you have one of those abilities. You're one of those people who, when you start talking about this stuff, everything, I know people would have been watching, just like nodding and just being like, yeah, that's me. And I think what you do is articulate the ways that you felt, but do that free from judgment. And I guess that's what you're asking of people to do themselves, right? When they look at people that struggle with addiction. Do you think, what is the mission? You talked about the mission with Warrior Kind, right? And we talk about breaking the stigma. How do you think we do that? Where do you think we go in that conversation?
I think it's education. I think really it's getting through to people, and that's why I'm so open about that. I used to do that. I used to stigmatize. I did that to my dad. I'm open about it and I'm honest about it, because I think I can't preach about stigma and discrimination when I used to do that. So I think it's having that open conversation and letting people know and educating and sharing my story and saying, I did this and it was too late for me. By the time I realised the consequences, it was too late. Don't make that same mistake. And I think we need to really, if I'm being brutally honest, we need to go into schools and we need to be educating from such a young age. We need to be educating young people to respect the dangers of alcohol, to respect the repercussions. We need to be teaching society as a whole and raising more awareness, just like there is with cigarettes. Like cigarettes, we all know they cause lung cancer. 90% of lung cancers are caused by smoking. Lung cancer is one of the leading causes of cancer. So we all know that. We all know smoking is bad for us. We don't call a smoker an addict like we would a person addicted to alcohol. So it's having that awareness. I'm not saying I'm anti-alcohol. I'm not saying people shouldn't enjoy themselves when they want to. If they've got a healthy, well, can you have a healthy relationship with alcohol? I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I've not really thought about that just at the moment. But I think awareness and education is the mission. And I think getting into schools, collaborating with people like yourself, with charities like Nacoa, with other alcohol charities, having these open, honest, raw conversations like this, being very honest about what we've been through, what it can cause, what it can do to families, how it can literally tear families apart, literally. And the ripple effects from alcohol addiction towards the families is significant. I mean, I think I read a worrying statistic not so long ago that there's 2.6 million dependent drinkers in the UK. That's 2.6 million people that we know of. How many other people are in denial who have a drink problem, but they've got no confidence to say, I need help? Or how many of them don't even realise it's an issue because it's so ingrained and it's so enmeshed in our everyday life that it's normal. Some people come home, do you know what, it's that. And I think really, I think it's education. I think it sounds really cliche, but education, awareness, and having these conversations with no judgment, no stereotype, and encouraging more people to look at their relationships or their loved ones' relationships. But yeah, ultimately, I think education awareness is key. That sounds cheesy, doesn't it?
And Beth's, no, it doesn't, because it's right. It's right. And Beth's just said here that 82% of alcoholics don't access any help, right? And I think so much of that, like what you said, is about, well, one, it's about stigma, but I think so much of it as well is that lack of education, right? Because if you think back to the young girl that you're talking about, and how you kind of like abandoned yourself, and how you was so tapped into your dad's emotions, and you didn't really know what normal was, and you felt like he changed his mood and everything like that. We know with Nacoa, one of the statistics that we know is that 1 in 5 children are living with a parent that drinks too much. And so for me, if you look at a classroom of 30, there's 6 in every single class, right? And that's 6 children who are living with that, not knowing what normality is, right? And nobody's telling them. And nobody's telling them that what they're experiencing isn't normal, right? I know as a child, my dad would smash the house up when he was drunk, right? And I didn't even know that didn't happen in other people's houses. So I think education is really, really important. And one of the things that we do at Nacoa as well is go in and try and teach teachers as well to kind of notice some of these signs. Because I think a lot of teachers just see bad children sometimes, right? They just see naughty kids, and they don't realize that so much of what they might be experiencing might be as a result, right? And that's why I think we should start at the youngest age.
No, definitely. Like Dave and I, we've got a talk in a school on Monday, and I think there's going to be 400 pupils that we're going to be delivering talks to from 2 different perspectives. And it's tackling it at that age, and it's really, because at that age you can still get to them while they're young, and you can still raise awareness, you can all of that. And I think it's so important because, like you said, teachers and other people don't see any deeper. And it could be sometimes I was the quiet kid. I was the one that was trying to overachieve because I was overcompensating for something that I didn't feel like I was fitting into, because I didn't want to fit that narrative. I mean, 2005 was, well, Shameless was like one of the most popular TV sitcoms, and their perception of an alcoholic was just awful. It was a misrepresentation, I think. I don't think that's not necessarily how people come across. Not many people knew, looking at my dad, that he was a physically dependent alcoholic. We knew as a family, but again, it's that misrepresentation and it's that stigma. So I was an overachiever. I was that child that was overcompensating because I didn't want that stigma. I didn't want that association. But I was consumed with anxiety, and I didn't understand that wasn't normal. I just learned to live with it. I learned to just accept that, and this is me. I'm always gonna worry about things. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that that anxiety was a manifestation of growing up in the environment I was growing up in. And that's so important. I think there's so, and I love what Nacoa do. I love, there's different categories, isn't there, that we place ourselves in as those children. I'm definitely I fall into the hero child category, and I could instantly place my sisters as well. But I think Nacoa are doing remarkable work. I think these lives that you're doing are just amazing. They're really creating a dialogue, an important dialogue that we need to have.
Yeah, and it's important because, when you start talking about the hero child, for example, when we go into schools, and I've got a question off the back of this as well, when we go into schools, one of the biggest realizations that teachers have is they will recognize some children, particularly siblings, that they think kind of sound like they might be struggling with a parent that drinks too much. And then they will be blown away at the fact that they've always assumed that one of them was okay because they were doing so well at school, right? And so they don't realize that doing well at school was their reaction to what was going on at home. And did you receive any support through school? Did anybody know? Did you talk to anybody about it when you were growing up, when you were a child?
Nobody had a clue. In fact, I delivered a rate, although I've been doing this work for months now, or even a couple of years with Warrior Kind, and I've been talking about what I've been going through. I did an interview with Jeremy Vine yesterday on BBC Radio 2, and I had messages come through from people saying when they knew me when I was that age, I had no idea. I didn't know you went through that, even despite the fact that I've been talking about it anyway, but it's still that what's the word? I don't even know what I'm saying, but they had no idea. Nobody had any idea. Even family members, distant family members had no idea. I think my dad's quirks were quite obvious, but don't think people put two and two together and thought that, like, okay, he's physically dependent, he's an active addiction with alcohol. But no, I put on such a remarkable show, really, looking back, and even up until he died, even on social media. And I think that's where I think it becomes toxic, because we're always quick enough to share the good, and we're happy to share the good, and we're happy to share the good business. But when it comes to people say, well, they call it airing your dirty laundry, I think that's wrong. I think you can't share the good and talk about the good and not share the bad sometimes. I think you've got to have a nice equal balance. And no, nobody had a clue. Nobody. Teachers,
Wow.
and friends, nobody. It was a family secret, and it was treated like a dirty family secret that was brushed under the carpet, and we weren't going to tell anybody, because I didn't want to face that disloyalty as well. I didn't want to feel like I was being disloyal to my dad by talking about him behind his back. So there was that I was contending with as well.
Yeah. Ellie's saying here that everyone saw her mum as the fun mum, but no one knows what goes on. And do you think I think there's something about society there as well, right? In that it's very easy to hide a really severe alcohol problem in our society, right? Because it can be my dad, I was 9 years old when my dad, I lost my dad as a result of alcohol. And people will still tell me today, he weren't that bad, he just loved to drink. And you think, what does that even mean? And I think sometimes people say those things as a reflection of their own relationship with alcohol, because they think, well, if I say that he was really bad, then that means that I must be quite bad. Do you think there's something in that?
100%. I literally, as you said that, in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, you're challenging somebody's relationship with alcohol, and I think that puts a lot of people on defense massively. Yeah, because really, like I was saying earlier on, it's so ingrained and socially accepted amongst society that there's probably millions of people that have a problem with alcohol, but they just don't want to admit it. And again, it's the stigma. If I said to you, you're smoking too much, would you be offended? Probably not. If I said you're drinking too much, you'd be offended. There's two massive discrepancies there, and I think they're very contradicting and very double standards. You can, I think there is such a huge issue. It's so socially accepted. The dangers aren't advertised and promoted like they are with cigarettes. And I think there's massive reform that's needed around alcohol itself. Massive.
I think there's a huge piece there as well about how much people want to protect their own relationship with alcohol. Not just the people that were like my dad, right, that had a terrible relationship with it. I think there's these people that find themselves in that middle ground.
Yeah.
And they're like terrified that if we start having a real conversation about it, then they might have to look at their own relationship with alcohol. And that's why I think it's really good when we get to this place where we don't demonize alcohol, right? Because I recognize in myself, I used to take my kids to the pub and I would get steaming drunk and leave them in the corner and no one would say a word to me, right? Nobody would say, do you think you should make a change? Do you think you're doing that right? Now when I go in a pub and I don't have a drink, everybody wants to talk about it and everybody wants to tell me that I should be doing it differently and maybe I should just have one and learn to drink like a real person, right? And all of that stuff. And I say the people that find it really uncomfortable when I'm in anywhere not drinking are normally the people that are struggling with their own relationship with alcohol because it's holding a mirror up to them, right? Yeah. They're looking at me and thinking, oh, you can stop. Maybe I need to look at my own relationship. I know you said earlier that you don't know if you can have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I kind of look at I always use my wife as an example. I don't think I've ever seen her drunk, but she likes a Baileys when she's wrapping the Christmas presents.
Yeah.
And I would say that that's like a fairly like healthy relationship with her.
Yeah.
It doesn't cause a problem. It doesn't have an impact on anybody. What's your own relationship like with alcohol today, and what does it look like?
Um, I can't enjoy a drink like I used to. So my
Mm,
relationship prior to my dad's death, I could go out with my friends and I could enjoy a drink and get a little bit merry or tipsy, and I'd enjoy the feeling. I'm not going to lie. But now I have this resentment towards it, and perhaps that will change as I get older, but it's still at the
mm,
moment too raw. The smell just triggers something. If I have a drink when I'm out, I'll have maybe a rosé with lemonade in it. Like it has to be watered down with some kind of mixer because the smell, the association, every time I see it, every time I look at an alcoholic drink, I just look at
mm,
it as though it ruined my family, it killed my dad,
mm.
and it's caused so many issues. So I've just, yeah, it's, I don't know. I think it's very triggering for me at the moment. I would say it doesn't mean that I don't sometimes have a drink when I'm out and about, where I'm trying to get that feeling, but I'm kind of trying to build that relationship back up with it. But I can either take it or leave it. I'm quite happy to be the
Mm.
designated driver if we go out and not drink. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's at the moment, that's where I would say that I'm with alcohol.
And it's just so funny, isn't it, that with alcohol, we almost have to feel slightly awkward about whatever relationship we have with it, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's triggered by it in some way. Like we might be a little bit triggered by the fact that it exists, but then people that kind of drink it and like it seem to get triggered at the fact that we might not want to drink it. And then so what happens is the conversation never happens, right? Because everybody's too worried, and too worried about the denial that they might be using about their own relationship. And I do think why, when you say about the stigma and the conversations, it's so important to just start having real conversations where we, like you just did there. It's like, I don't really know where I'm at with it, but here's where I'm at with it. There shouldn't be a kind of benchmark for where we have to be at with it.
No, no.
And something I did want to ask you, how have things, because obviously now you're very open about it, right? And you're very open about your whole experience. I'm talking from my own kind of experience as well here. How does it feel now to be so open about it? Are there times when it's desperately exhausting and when you would like to just take it all back and stop talking about it? Does it feel better? How does it feel in comparison to how it used to be when you couldn't talk about it?
It feels a mixture, I'm not going to lie. So I feel very liberated and empowered. And then I feel really good about the amount of people it's helping. I get so many messages in my inbox that really motivate me and encourage me to keep going. People will say, you've made me look at my own relationship because I don't want my children to go through what you're going through. And stuff like that is really reminds me, and it instills why I did this in the first place. But then there are moments, and I had one not so long ago, where I had a call from BBC Radio 2 inviting me onto the Jeremy Vine show. This was about a month ago, and had the interview yesterday. And I got really excited. And then all of a sudden, I had this lump like in the back of my throat, and my stomach just dropped. And I looked at my husband and I said, this is so wrong. I'm getting excited about going on a radio station, a national radio station, to talk about my experience of losing my dad. I'm exploiting my dad. And I had to really sit down with my husband and really go through that emotion of, am I exploiting him? Is this fair on my sisters? Is this fair on my mum that I'm being this open? Am I offending them? Am I upsetting people? I've lost a couple of friends over it. I've had friends say that I'm about a brand, or I'm using an experience for selfish purposes. And then it makes sometimes, and I think, oh, I just need to stop this because I'm so like consumed with it. It would be so much easier if I could just go and work full time and shut my laptop at 5 o'clock and not have any messages, or not have to think about or journal, or like it's very much a whirlwind. I'm not going to lie. Like, I had my own dreams and my own ambitions when I was a teenager of what I wanted to do, and all of those got really ruined because of my dad's drinking. Because I spoke about it the other day. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be an actress. I was good at it. That's what I was studying. But then I wanted security and I wanted to be comfortable, and the only way I was going to get that was to go and do a degree at university that would see me with some kind of stability once I leave. So again, I resent sometimes the platform that I've got, where I'm thinking, oh, I shouldn't be doing this for this. I shouldn't be talking about my dad's death. I shouldn't have even lost my dad. This shouldn't be something I'm doing. I should be using my platform to be doing something like my singing, like my acting, or whatever I wanted to focus on. So, but then there are other times where I feel so empowered and so good about what I'm doing that my dad's death is going to be a catalyst for positive change, and we can pull something good from this. So yeah, I would say it's a massive whirlwind of emotions. I'm not going to lie. It's I wouldn't ever stop doing it though, and that's the thing. I'm so fully like emotionally invested now that I'd never stop. I can't see myself stopping, and it's something that I feel needs to be. I feel a duty. I feel like it needs to be spoken about, and I feel like we need these conversations. So yeah, it's a whirlwind.
Yeah, I think that's an important conversation as well, you know, just to help people to understand how tricky it can be, right? And the mixed emotions that we do go through. I know some of our like famous patrons, some of the people that are in the spotlight quite a lot and talk about this stuff, have to do it quite sparingly, right? Because there is a large proportion of people that do come with this narrative of, you know, why are you using that to kind of like platform yourself or to do any of that? And so, you know, you've got that to contend with, and then the idea of the betrayal, you know. And I kind of change through it a lot, and I have times when I just don't want to open my phone. I don't want to open social media, and I don't want to hear people talking about anything or asking me how I am and all that kind of stuff, and you want to snatch it all back. And so I think it's a key thing for everyone to know, you know, if you come to a place where you want to start talking publicly about it, it's a rocky road in itself, right? There's kind of highs and lows in doing it. We've got sort of 15 minutes while we're in here. So just for the people that are in here, if you do have any questions for me to put to Sarah, then chuck them at me, and I can throw them towards Sarah as well. The question I like to ask everybody that comes on here, the first question is, if you could go back and speak to the little person that you were, let's go back to when you were a child and things were just starting to turn where you knew they were quite bad. What would you say to her now?
Oh, goodness. Oh, wow. What would I say? To not be afraid to express yourself or ask for help. And I think it's that's so important. And I think I felt so silenced as a child and as a teenager and a young adult. And I think that silence and hanging on to what you're going through. And the other thing is to not feel invalidated. Don't let anybody invalidate the way you're feeling. One of my dad's, and I love my dad dearly, and I suppose he was doing this to try and protect me, but the whole, you're being dramatic, there's nothing wrong with me, is almost a denial statement that invalidated my feelings. And I would say a big thing that I wish that I would have known growing up was that my feelings were valid, my emotions were valid, my anxiety was valid, my fear was valid, and to not be afraid to actually reach out to somebody else you trust and to talk to them about it, because I don't think it's healthy, is it? Internalizing all that pain and all that emotion just turned into anxiety as an adult. So yeah, that would be something that...
No, it's really powerful. It's really powerful, and it's exactly why the Nacoa helpline, we see it as so vitally important, because of the fear of betrayal and not knowing who you can talk to. Having that anonymous helpline, I don't think people necessarily realize just quite how important it is. And then to say what you say about validation, I think is the single-handedly the most important thing, right? Because if I were to pick out some of the things that you've said right throughout this, you talked about, you know, how annoyed you were with your dad and how he was letting you down and how you felt like he was self-inflicted, and all of those feelings are valid, right? And we can pull apart whether they're right or wrong to think them, but they're valid. and you had every right to think and feel them. And actually, I think what so many children and even adult children lack is a space to explore that without somebody trying to fix or change those things, but letting you feel it. And I think as we get the society to have more compassion for people in this space, it becomes really important for the communities around these people to be there, right? Because
Yeah.
at any given moment, the family, the loved ones of the people struggling aren't necessarily always the right people to give them the support that they need, right? Because we need to do a little bit of that kind of detaching ourselves as well sometimes.
Oh,
Let me bring
absolutely.
this question to you. What helped you the most to deal with the guilt you feel about your dad?
Um, talking about it and being open. Um, even, I mean, a lot of therapy as well. I did have a lot of therapy about over that. But I would say having that conversation with somebody you trust and
Mm,
basically saying everything as it is in your head and not being afraid to voice that. And my husband
mm,
was a great support for that. He would help me validate that and help and always reiterate that there was nothing else I could have done. I was suffering just as much as he was suffering. It's almost validating all of that guilt and just allowing me to accept and process it without, because I think the worst thing people can say, and it used to really frustrate me, is, oh, but everyone feels guilty when someone dies. It's normal. And I would
mm,
say, I don't think you understand. This is like, this is genuine guilt. I saw my dad 3 days before he died. He was in a bad way. I begged him to go to hospital and he wouldn't. So I walked away thinking, I can't watch you do this to yourself. And I felt so guilty about that. And it's having that conversation with my husband and going through all of that and having him really help me map it out as to why that's not my fault and why I shouldn't feel that. Well, it's natural to feel that guilt and it's okay to feel that guilt, but look at it this way and look at it from this perspective. So I think talking, but just being so open and
mm.
honest, I think is so
Yeah.
important.
Because it should never really be a child's responsibility to
No,
save
it
their
shouldn't.
parent, right? Not
No.
not not from something like that. And actually, it is never anybody's responsibility to do that. And again, I guess in so many ways, that's one of the big contradictions about being a COA, right? So many contradictions happen in that, sometimes the best thing that you can do to support that person that you love that's trapped in addiction is to look after yourself and do exactly what's right for you, right?
Yeah.
Because then in doing that, you might lay some boundaries and teach them some things as well. Um, Let me say this from Beth, ask you this. How do you deal with the fact it's an unavoidable death? That's what I struggle with the most. Wow, that's a powerful question.
How do I deal with that? Oh, goodness. I don't know. I Again, I suppose it's the process talking about it. And
Mm,
to me, I always felt it was avoidable at the time. I know now that it wasn't. And somebody actually, a good friend of mine, he's a GP, calls it a terminal illness. And
mm,
when he said that, it really kind of hit me. And I thought, wow, it is, isn't it? It is because it's it's something that you'll deal with the rest of your life, and unless you've got that support and that commitment to stay sober, and really, when he died, I didn't think it was unavoidable. I thought it was avoidable. I strongly
mm.
believed it was avoidable, and I suppose looking at it from that perspective, I don't think I probably still haven't come to terms with that, if I'm honest. Um,
Yeah,
I don't really know how to. That's a really good question.
yeah.
You're
And sometimes
stuck
the
with that.
answer is, I get asked this as well. How do you deal with this? How do you come to terms with certain things? And I think sometimes the answer is I don't, and I have spaces in my life to allow me not to.
Yeah,
Like I don't deal with it. The one thing that I kind of always bring up, as somebody who's quit drinking myself, right? Um, I can often say about my dad that it was an illness. He couldn't stop it. It wasn't his fault. It was because of the things that happened to him, and all of those things are true. But there will always be a part of me that says, but I stopped and he didn't. So what's the difference?
yeah,
Right? Did I just want it more than him? And then I look at a friend that I lost last year to alcohol, or had a problem with alcohol and lost him And he wanted to get sober just as much as I did, but he never fully did. And so it isn't even about how much they want to. So it's interesting when you talk about this terminal illness side of it and looking at it in that way, because what is the difference between me and my dad? And it ain't just that I was a slightly better person who decided to do it. And I think if we knew what the difference was, then we wouldn't lose these people, right?
Exactly.
And so I think sometimes the answer is I don't deal with it. I don't deal with it, and I have people in my life that help me deal with it.
And you know what? I'm probably the same. If I'm really honest, and I've not spoken about this last week, I've actually felt anger towards my dad. It's come out of nowhere. I felt angry at him, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Why? He's not even here, and although I'm doing all this advocating and this campaigning in his memory, and I felt angry with him. And maybe I felt angry because I've been so fueled with anxiety lately over what I'm doing and my own charity and getting that off the ground. And I've committed so much to that it gets so difficult that sometimes I think I wish I could just have a normal life where I could just go to work, shut my laptop and come home and do all the mum stuff and be that parent, have that financial stability. But I'm not. I'm doing this. And then I think I kind of blamed him for that. So I don't think I properly dealt with a lot of the issues, and maybe issues will come up as I get older. But like you, I have people that help me deal with it. My husband's a great support. He's a great rock. I can tell him anything, and I can talk to my mum about it as well. And I'll always have that support from my mum because she knew, she was living it with me. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there are times where I don't always know the answers to things, or I'm not fully recovered from this. And who knows when I'll be fully recovered? I might never fully recover, and that's okay. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And it's okay to be angry with somebody that you love, right? And it's not a reflection of how much you love them. I always use I think this is a really good analogy, that if I accidentally dropped a massive brick on your foot, right?
Yeah.
You might get a little bit angry. You could know that it was an accident, and you could be like, it's all right, Josh, I know that you did it completely accidentally, but I swore a load because it's really hurt my foot, and my foot is still injured even though it was an accident, and I still have to deal with that. And so you're allowed to be angry with that. It doesn't mean that you think I'm horrible. You're just angry with the situation. And I remember talking to Hillary, our CEO, right at the beginning of my journey with Nacoa, and she was talking about how somebody else had felt a lot of anger towards their parent, and I looked at her and said, I don't think I've ever been angry with my dad. And then I don't think Hillary said anything, but as I said it, I was like, well, that's not right. Like when I look at all the things that he did, I should be angry. And then I realized that I had been angry, but I'd never allowed myself to aim it at my dad, because I thought if I do, then that means I don't love him. And of course that's not true, right?
Yeah.
We can be ridiculously angry. Anybody that's got kids knows you can be ridiculously angry with somebody that you love.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And I think, again, it's another thing, another part of our feelings and emotions that we sometimes don't allow ourselves. And anger, of course, isn't bad. And, I use that anger, it sounds like, in a lot of the ways that you do. We take that anger and we use it in a positive way to fuel some of the work that we're doing, right? And I think that's really important. I just want to read a couple of these things so that I don't miss them. Sophie says that everything that you say resonates with me. Thank you for being so open and honest. Tom Allen, hello Tom, great man, says that the guilt is real. I had the same experience with my brother for a few days before he died. And Tom also says that he's in recovery for 20 years and nothing he did saved his brother from his own alcoholism. And it's something that he carries with him today with a different perspective and with love, he supposes, which is good. Incredible. Look, we're sort of nearly there. This is what... one of these conversations, I think when you do these conversations in this way, which is just with a curiosity and free from judgment, right, and with no kind of needed outcome, I think we always learn. We learn about ourselves. I learn every time I do one of these, I learn. So, I want to say a huge thank you from my perspective to you.
Thank
Before
you.
we close this down, is there anything else you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
Oh, what do I don't know. I don't know. I think
It's a horrible question.
I've literally said so much. Listen, I always say to people, and I really do mean this, that my inbox is always open. Maybe I might not, I do what you do. I'll look at my messages and I might have 20 odd messages in there, and I know, and I'll look at them and I think, right, I'm not in the headspace right now, but I always, whoever messages me, I will always make sure that I will reply. So I'd say I'm such an empathetic person towards this as well, naturally, a natural empath, and sometimes that can be a curse as much as it is a blessing. But I genuinely want to help people that are going through this or have been through this, and help validate their feelings, which is why I'm so open and honest. So if you want to follow that journey, then great. Follow me on Instagram. We've got a great platform as well coming up with Warrior Kind, which is about to be launched. We're launching our own social media app. Wow. And our own community, so where people have the choice to be anonymous if they want to, if they don't feel comfortable identifying. So that's coming out on World Mental Health Day. I'm really keen to support Nacoa, like, as much as I can, in any way that I can. I wish that I would have known about you when I really needed that support. I think support services like yours are just absolutely crucial, because we're suffering just as much. There's no handbook out there on how to deal with this. So having that, like you said, that validation of feelings. But yeah, I would just say my inbox is open. And yeah, that sounds really, I've said some right cliche lines today, haven't I?
you haven't because I think, look, cliches exist because they're quite, they're often good. What you do is you take the cliches and open them up and give us some sense behind them as well, which is, I think, is really important. And yeah, look, we tell everybody that does these lives that they end up kind of being your Nacoa initiation. So you won't get away from us now. You're part of the community anyway.
Oh, I'm happy to be.
I'm glad that the signal got sorted, and I feel a little bit better about that now. So, and listen, from a personal perspective, I love the work that you're doing. I think it's incredible. It's reaching the people that it needs to reach. So it's just a massive thank you for everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll see you again very soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Josh. Thanks,
All
everyone.
Right. Take care, Sarah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.